So let's jump over to topic two, taking a break from games. Let's talk about comics. Let's talk about fun stuff there. So yeah, TJ and I have connected for a while on comic stuff, obviously with the MCU and the DC movies and video games, stuff like that. But I've never actually picked your brain, TJ, on how you got into all this stuff. So yeah, figured I would kind of talk about that now. So yeah, TJ, what got you not necessarily into comics to start, but what got you into, what was your entry point for like the superhero universe and stuff like that?
Honestly, I mean, probably a lot of kids my age was movies.
Mm,
Obviously, you had like the X-Men movie and Spider-Man and stuff, and that was coming out. I think X-Men came out in 2000.
yeah.
So I'm like 7 years old. Like that's kind of you're right in the wheelhouse. You watch a superhero movie when you're 7 years old, you're probably going to be awestruck a little bit. Um, I do remember as well the first Tobey Maguire Spider-Man movie.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I remember I went with my dad and our next door neighbor randomly, and we showed up late because of my neighbor, and I was so mad. And we went in, and there was like no seats because it was like opening weekend of Spider-Man, and the only seats we could get was the very front row. It's the
Oh.
only time I've sat front row in a movie. But I have no idea how old I am when that movie came out. But let's just say I'm 10 years old, and you're in the front row. The movie screen might as well be the whole world because that's
Mm-hmm.
all you can see, like your peripheral. So I'm seeing Spider-Man, those awesome shots where he's like swinging through the city and stuff, and I'm like, I feel like I'm swinging through the city. Like it was awesome. So
Mm.
definitely after that, that really got me into it. And then right around that same time, I remember my fourth grade class with Mrs. Black's class. We would get comic books and trade them in class and like at recess and stuff.
Hmm.
Um, and I want to say it was like the dollar store or something, but there was just like you could get some really crappy comic books in like a pack of three for like $1,
Mm-hmm.
and we would go through and pull out the good ones and trade them and sell them and stuff like that. I think that's where I found like Deathlock
Mm.
was in those kind of comics. It was kind of like those kind of 90s guys that fell off
Mm-hmm.
were kind of in these comic packs. So we would trade them. And then on the more serious side of that, once I got into trading them and stuff, and my parents noticed that I had comic books, whenever I would be hospitalized with my asthma as a kid, my dad would go to Heroes Aren't Hard to Find in Charlotte, North Carolina, the comic book store,
Oh.
and he would buy me some new comics, which I think at the time was there was a Batman and Superman run where they were together.
Okay.
Had a cool logo. So he would buy me the newest issue of that with the glossy pages, and I would get into it. So I was kind of reading comic books in the hospital bed and trading them in fourth grade class probably.
Okay. Okay. What were characters you were finding yourself relating to or really diving into once you were delving into these comics or going from the movie standpoint?
But definitely Spider-Man. Um, I forget who. I had a couple of like family friends who gave me like a bunch of older comic books,
Okay.
but somebody gave me. They were reprints, I'm pretty sure, so they were worthless. But they were the first Spider-Man runs,
Hmm.
like reprints of them on like really thin, crappy reprinting. But man, those were the absolute best. Reading the original like '60s Spider-Man, especially as a kid, he's like going to high school and stuff.
Yeah.
So it was really cool to read through that. And then also, and because of the movie, I was inspired by Spider-Man, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but then also the Flash. I
Okay.
really liked the Flash. He was my favorite for a while. Um, like I read, I want to say it was a novel. Actually, it wasn't even a comic, but there was a novel where the Flash's girlfriend is coming over for their anniversary, and he forgot because he was fighting Gorilla Grodd.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like standing in his Flash costume, and she knocks on the door, and then he has like the internal bubble where he's like, "Oh, it's our anniversary."
Mm-hmm.
So while he goes, "Come in," and while she's opening the door, he cleans his apartment, he takes a shower, he makes dinner, and then he goes and gets a present and comes back and sets it on the table, like all while it took her to open the door. And I was like, "That's the coolest hero of all time, right there."
Okay. Just because I can't wipe it from my mind. Just a tangent. You're not going to have an answer. How do you
How did the
shower
shower?
fast?
Yes. Also, I should have. He made dinner, by the way, like in the oven,
Okay.
and all I'm gonna say to that is Speed Force.
Yeah.
Okay, that's all you need to know.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
I don't know what the Speed Force is or how it works or what it does, but Speed Force, baby, that's what happened.
Oh boy! All right. So after these initial, you know, inspirations, or rather the, you know, characters you connected with the Flash, with Spider-Man, um, what was your next level of like, this is something I'm invested in? What was the next step in like intrigue and like things that caught your attention?
I think it was actually uh, Marvel Ultimate Alliance 1, probably.
Hell yeah.
I My parents bought me a Wii when I was in 8th grade, not because of Wii Sports or Super Smash Bros. Or something. I got a Wii so I could play Ultimate Alliance because
Hmm.
I had a GameCube and I was playing X-Men Legends, and they were like, "We're not going to put Ultimate Alliance on the GameCube. We're only putting it on the Wii." And I was like, "What?" So, which I'm still mad about to this day because the GameCube absolutely can handle that game,
Yeah.
but that's neither here nor there. Especially since the Wii is just like two GameCube RAMs duct taped together on the inside. But yeah, so it was that game. I played that game religiously when it came out, like the summer in between 8th grade and 9th grade. And man, that game, the storyline to that game, as you know, is like it's an original story, but they pull in a lot of elements from a lot of the different corners of the Marvel universe that I had not been exposed to before.
Yep.
So learning about like the Scree and the Muonic Inducer and Galactus and all that stuff, and I'm like, this is really cool. It led me to go on and investigate a lot more on my own,
Hmm.
especially some of the characters. Like I didn't know who Moon Knight was when I was playing that game. I didn't know who some of these characters were, or I didn't know as much about them as I thought. So I would go back. I'm like, who's I didn't know who Doctor Strange was, but I'm like, oh, he's got like little purple, blast. That's pretty cool. And, you look into it and you kind of learn. I feel like that game honestly is great at like world building
Yep.
because you kind of get highlights of a lot of different things throughout the universe, and you can kind of go in and fill it in on your own time.
Definitely. Yeah, it seems like we shared a lot of different, similar pathing. I would say the '90s Fox cartoons were probably my big entry point, like the Spider-Man and X-Men shows. Like I remember that being the first place I saw Iron Man and being like, "Oh, it's a cool robot," and not realizing obviously it's a dude in the suit and all that jazz. Um, but that and the action figures, and then like you mentioned, the X-Men Legends and the Ultimate Alliance, I agree wholeheartedly. Like those games just expanded um, the little knowledge I did have to just be like, oh, there's all these other characters that are really cool. And I appreciated what those games did with like X-Men Legends. You could get the different costumes, but then you had like those side missions you could do in Cerebro, right? No, not Cerebro. I'm sorry, the Danger Room, and you
Yeah,
could
the
get like,
comic book missions.
yes, thank you, and you could get the little backstories there. And then Ultimate Alliance, I feel like they did something similar. Maybe I'm mistaken, but they
Oh,
all.
sorry. I think the Ultimate Alliance was the comic book missions.
Oh, okay, okay, yeah. They had those, and like you said, they just had this wide breadth of like characters from villains and heroes that like I had no idea. Like I remember seeing Winter Soldier there for the first time, not
Yep.
learning
Yeah.
about him, but I'm like, oh, you're just some jabroni, some jobber, and then seeing and learning eventually, which we'll probably talk about the MCU, being like, oh my god, like that's so cool, and he was just this guy in this game. It was just there, being like, man, I have a gun.
Yep.
It's just,
And
it's
also
crazy.
those comic book missions in Ultimate Alliance, um, the one for Captain America, it was like one for each character,
Yep.
and you would unlock a special costume which had special stats if you did that.
Hmm.
And you had to find the comic book to begin with
Yep.
in the level. But the one for Captain America it wasn't just like a random mission. They retold comic book stories in
Mm.
those missions.
Mm.
And the one for Captain America was the Winter Soldier, obviously to
Ah.
reuse the asset of the boss fight from the
Sure.
first act. But still, they went through and actually told the story of the Winter Soldier. I remember playing through in this little isometric Diablo style game the drama of you know, Captain America figuring out that it was Bucky for the first time and stuff
Hmm.
like that.
Hmm.
And so that's that kind of stuff, like filling you on like legitimate actual comic book lore, was really cool.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, game wise, those ones definitely stood out. And then I'd be remiss if I didn't shout out Marvel vs. Capcom 2. Like, just all the bright lights and obviously the shiny stuff in there. I've talked about it many times on the podcast, but dad humoring me and playing with that with me in the arcades, just, mashing the buttons and playing as Spider-Man and Captain America and I think Wolverine.
Did you take him for a ride?
Of course. But seeing that roster too, like Venom being introduced to him there along with the 90s cartoon, just was crazy. So you mentioned Spider-Man, you mentioned Flash, and then you mentioned Moon Knight. So what has your history, like, are you still invested in these three characters, or have you kind of moved on to other ones as you've gone on?
I just haven't really been reading comic books, like
Sure.
the actual comic books, as of late. But I'm still invested in those characters as far as like the MCU and stuff go. Like I was very excited when the Moon Knight show came out.
Yep.
I was very pleasantly surprised with a lot of it, and I had critiques of other parts of it. But yeah, so anytime the characters are mentioned in any other universes, like video games and stuff like that, I'll always tune in. But as far as like reading the comic book series, probably not.
Sure.
Especially because like Captain America, for example, was another superhero I got really invested into at the time because of Ultimate Alliance.
Mm-hmm.
But like, I'm not gonna keep up with the Captain America comic books. I'm gonna be honest with you. There's like two series, going on at the same time. Always, it's a lot.
Yeah, I agree. It's definitely a lot, and I find that's a difficult jumping in point for anybody. It's like, where do I start? And I'm sure there's people definitely more knowledgeable than us, and are like, oh, you can do this, like have an easy path. But I found that something always difficult for me to do. Shout out to Mile High Comics, which I went to recently, but like that place is huge, as you've seen through photos. Like, whenever I go to a shop like that, I'm always trying to find like the graphic novels, I guess is what you would call them, where it's a more compiled story beat, like, point to point. It when it comes to issue, it's crazy to think of how people keep up with all of it, if that makes sense.
It has to be subscription. That's the only way you can do it, really.
Sure.
Like you have to be subscribed to the relevant comics to just have them every month. Otherwise, you'll never keep up with it. There's no way.
Yeah, I think the closest, sorry, real quick, the closest I had to like week to week was when they did their second Secret Wars event. Like, they had mini runs of like, Spider-Gwen and her story, which thank God, because now I love Spider-Gwen stuff. She had a little part. They had like Baby Avengers versus X-Men I was really into. They had like a 2099 universe I was into, but it was like 5 issues. And I'm like, this is perfect. Just give me this.
Yeah, I think I mean, you're saying you're reading the graphic novels. I feel like always for the big Marvel events, that's how I would consume them. Is I would just get the kind of overview.
Yep.
Where like I remember the Civil War when that was going on. Like I just read the big Civil War compilation.
Mm-hmm.
And yet there were things that I was confused on, like that they didn't fill in. Like, why is Thor an android?
Yep.
Like, some weird stuff like that. Like, why is this character, expelled or whatever? Why is Spider-Man acting like this? But ultimately, you still do get the major points of the story, and it's still pretty satisfying to read. So I would kind of do that instead of the individual ones for the most part.
Yeah, definitely. There's been a few that have been standouts, like you mentioned, the Civil War one. Over on the DC side of things, my buddy Nolan let me borrow, I think it's The Long Halloween. There's like 3 of them, but those are fantastic. But yeah, it's tricky because it's like, you don't know where to jump in, and then if it is those graphic novels, there's always those hidden pieces where it's like, I don't feel like I'm getting the full story here, but you try and piece it together. It's interesting.
That's probably why Moon Knight accelerated to become one of my favorite characters. Besides the fact that he's just a bad bitch, it's that all of his comic series, for better or worse, were pretty short, except for the '80s one.
Okay.
So I think Ultimate Alliance came out in 2006. Correct me if I'm wrong.
I'll look it up.
But there was also, coincidentally, a 2006 Moon Knight series, which is still my favorite Moon Knight series. That's the craziest one, where it's like his powers wax and wane with the moon, and he was a mercenary. Like, He rips a dude's face off in the first comic book in the first series and stuff. Very weird. That's the first one where they're like, "Oh no, he doesn't have multiple secret identities to gain an advantage. He has multiple personality disorder. He's crazy.
Hmm.
His mind is gone." So that was, I think it was like 20 or 30 issues, maybe. Didn't last for that long, but that was like playing Ultimate Alliance. I was like, let me look into Moon Knight. I would like to read a Moon Knight comic.
Hmm.
And then that was the series that I read immediately afterwards, and it was very contained. Moon Knight wasn't going to hang out with Luke Cage and shit. Nobody wants to hang out with Moon Knight, so it was very easily digestible, and you just kind of don't get that unless you choose an obscure ass character. You're not going to get that really.
Sure. You were correct with 2006, a nice job there. So yeah, so from the games, then going into the movies, do you feel that this has helped your excitement for comics or kept it the same?
Yeah, I feel like actually, I kind of wish I didn't read the comic books,
Mm?
to be honest with you, a lot of times because I think Captain America: Civil War is a perfect example. That movie is awesome.
Yeah.
The movie kicks ass. There's, giant man's fighting, Black Panther's crawling up his legs, and Spider-Man swinging around. It's a childhood dream. It's awesome. But because I read the comic books, I'm like, well, it's not as cool. It's like 300 superheroes fighting all at the same time,
Sure,
like in
sure.
in the New York City streets. Like, there's always kind of that little. I'm like, well, it's not as cool. Like, there's always that little extra layer. Like when I'm watching an MCU movie, I'm like, it's just not quite what I want to say. It's not all the way there because they are still trying to toe that line of being commercially successful and accessible to everybody.
Yep.
And I get that. If they didn't do that, they wouldn't have been successful to begin with. So like, I wouldn't have Captain America and Avengers trilogy to watch
Mm-hmm.
if maybe they did it my style and made the Captain America movie a really gritty World War II.
Mm-hmm.
Like I don't think that they would make a bunch of them. So I wouldn't get all the movies that I love. So it is a give and take where it's like I'm glad the movies do what they do so that they can be successful. But at the same time, almost every time I'm watching a Marvel movie or a DC movie for that matter, I'm like, they just almost get to comic book level and then they don't. The only
Okay.
exception is like some of the big movies, obviously, like Avengers Infinity War. That's a comic book level movie. Like that's things are happening.
Mm-hmm.
Um so yeah, I feel like that's kind of where I'm coming at from that is like the comic books kind of did. It's kind of like reading the book before you watch the movie. Like you're gonna be slightly disappointed even if it's the best book ever or the best movie ever. I mean,
Sure. So we talked a lot about Marvel. So going back to the Flash, is there anybody DC wise who you've connected with other than the Flash?
I'm gonna be honest with you, not really.
Okay.
Really,
All right, that's
I think
fair.
it's just the Flash. Just trying to think of there was somebody else that I really liked. They were in the
Injustice.
fighting game. Yeah,
Injustice.
they were in Injustice 2.
Okay.
Um,
Blue Beetle.
trying to Blue Beetle, yes, but
Firestorm.
also yes, it was
Oh,
Firestorm.
okay. All right.
That was his friend. I was gonna say like I didn't know who Firestorm was. I played Injustice maybe like a year ago,
Sure.
like by myself, and I was like, who is Firestorm? So I looked him up. I'm like, this guy's pretty cool. I
Mm-hmm.
like Firestorm and I like Blue Beetle, because isn't Firestorm there's like a scientist in his head or something?
Yeah, it's two different individuals like morphed together or fused, and they can split and divide. But if they need to use the Firestorm powers, then they have to fusion hot dance or something like that.
Yeah, that's sick. I like him. I also, like I said, I like the Flash. Um, but otherwise, yeah, I just really don't really mess with DC too much. I like their movie. Who doesn't like Batman? Obviously, everybody likes Batman. And I like their Batman movies. I like their that Suicide Squad movie was really good. I'm excited for Joker Folie à Deux or whatever the hell the sequel is called
Mm-hmm.
with
Mm-hmm.
Lady Gaga.
Yep. It's Harley.
Yeah, she was that movie A Star Is Born with her is incredible. She's an incredible actress
Hmm.
and singer, obviously. So I'm excited for Lady Gaga for that. But otherwise, yeah, as far as like the comic books go, not really. It was just
Yeah.
a flash. A couple of my friends tried to get me to read God, something Night. Say it
Hmm.
was a lantern a lantern
Oh, like
event.
Night Corps, Night Corps, Night
Might
Black
have
Knight,
been
Blackest Night.
Blackest Night. That's
Okay,
it.
okay, yeah,
Blackest Night.
yeah,
Yeah. See, you know what I was talking about.
yeah.
I read a little bit of Blackest Night, but I never finished it. It just wasn't
Gotcha.
really. I don't really like how DC, like 90% of things in DC, it's all about gods and myths,
Hmm.
and I more prefer, getting bit by a radioactive spider for my kind of hero. That's kind of my thing.
Hmm.
Uh, Not a big deal either way.
Hmm. Did you ever
Did you see
delve?
the Flash movie?
No, I still need to. Like, I was excited for it, and then all the Ezra stuff came out, and I was like, "Ugh." But no, I'll watch it eventually on HBO.
I I didn't expect. I loved it.
Okay.
I didn't expect to. I loved it. They did they showed how he got his powers, and
Hmm.
it was pretty accurate to what I remember.
Okay.
Also, they had the stupid costume in the ring thing from the original comics
Oh,
that I
did
adored.
they? Okay.
Yeah. Obviously, it's not as dumb as a spandex suit like expanding out of
Yeah.
his ring, but
Hmm.
it's still pretty dumb, so I like it.
All right, all right. Did you get into any like independent comics outside of the big two, Dark Horse or the Turtles or Spawn or anything like that?
Not really. I had a bunch of those comics from those like crappy 3 packs I was talking
Yep.
about where we would trade them. I think I had a bunch of those like kind of offbeat, independent, gritty 90s. They're always hyper violent, the
Oh yeah.
90s comics. But yeah, I never really got into Spawn or anything
Hmm.
like that. I
Sure.
never really got into any of the McFarlane verse per se.
Hmm. Hmm.
What about yourself? Did you ever?
No, I think like we talked about like the games being the biggest, well, games and movies being the biggest avenues of like opening up my knowledge to this. Like I always knew of Spawn, but like never seemed up my alley, and like Hellboy, but like once Hellboy was in Injustice 2, obviously the Hellboy movies, and then Spawn being in Mortal Kombat 11. Yeah. Like, that was like, oh, these guys look really cool. Did I delve farther than what the game had to offer? No, not really. But um, that was probably my extent with them. And then, like, the Turtles, I always knew, obviously, from the show, or once again, the early games, but, like, didn't realize they were a comic at first. So that's kind of intriguing. But yeah,
Yeah,
never
dark
went to
comic at
venture.
that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. Like I've heard they have a really good I don't know if it's a graphic novel, but like short story, like was it The Last Ronin, something like that for the Turtles. That sounds like an
Yes,
intriguing read, but I haven't gotten it yet.
they're making a game off of that actually as
Are
well.
they? Ooh, okay, okay.
Yeah, and you're gonna be able to use all four of the turtles' weapons and stuff because
So
you're the last
I
one.
know a little bit of the story, and it seems like that's based off. Like, do you know anything about that story?
Now I know literally the cliff notes of like all the turtles get killed except for one turtle.
Yeah, so that turtle, whoever it is, I don't know. Yeah, he kind of adopts the other weapons to homage them. So yeah, that makes sense that they would have it in the game, all four of them. So that's cool. All right.
Yeah, that would be a sick game. I
Yeah.
hear they're going for like a God of War style game is
Oh, okay. All
what
right.
I heard. So
That'd be neat. So we talked a lot about heroes. Were there any villains that you resonated or connected with?
Doctor Doom.
Hmm. Okay.
Doctor Doom was really cool. He's very stupid, but he's very cool.
All right.
I did read a lot of the because of the 60s Spider-Man stuff that ended up going into a lot of the 60s Fantastic Four stuff.
Hmm.
Spider-Man was very involved with the Fantastic Four. He wanted to become a member of the Fantastic Four at one point. That was a whole arc and shit. So, uh, yeah, read a lot of Doctor Doom there. Also, the Green Goblin was cool, but I feel like I just liked Willem Dafoe's portrayal of him in the Spider-Man movie.
Sure.
I think that's just what I was obsessed with. And also, Venom is just cool. Like, he's Venom.
Yeah, definitely. Nice.
I mean, yeah, as I got older, I feel like I liked the villains a little bit more. Like, you become a teenager and you actually learn world history a little bit. And you're like, okay, Magneto, that's actually pretty cool. Like,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I forget which X-Men movie it is where he's like hunting ex-Nazis in Argentina.
Origins.
That
Wait,
was,
no.
oh, that
No,
was
first class. First class. Sorry,
first
first
class.
class.
First class. That was it. Yeah. And I was like, what is the what's the problem here?
Right, yeah.
What's they're trying to show him like he's like a bad guy. I'm like, they are Nazis though.
Yeah.
So I mean, hashtag Magneto did nothing wrong.
To a point. To a point.
Okay, in that opening sequence, that's it though.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
After that, yeah, no Days of Future Past.
Yeah.
Nonsense.
Okay, I guess last question I have, just because we were talking about the movies. Do you have a favorite movie moment with a hero? Or villain? Character moment.
Favorite movie moment. Oh, with okay, that's Spider-Man. Far From Home.
Mm-hmm.
The sequence when Mysterio gets to do Mysterio things.
Yep.
Finally, he like does the imagery things and like makes Spider-Man think that he's fighting someone, no one's there, and he hits a Spider-Man, doesn't he hit himself in the head or something?
He
He
gets
like
hit by a fucking bus.
yeah, it's, he gets hit by a bus and stuff. Yeah, he like used the illusion to beat him up, and I
Yeah.
was like, that's the coolest thing I've ever seen in my whole life, and
Yeah.
all I ever wanted, and I almost cried. It was awesome.
Yeah.
It was fantastic.
That one was definitely amazing. The one that went straight to my head is the opening of X2, the Nightcrawler sequence in
Oh God,
the
yes.
present. Yeah. Holy shit.
Nightcrawler's still my favorite mutant
Mm-hmm.
because of that scene, probably.
Yeah.
That scene and the scene
Ultimate
in
Alliance
Ultimate
scene.
Alliance.
Yeah. And you're like, I don't even get to play as him? Come on!
Yeah, and he picks those swords off the
Yep.
wall. And like, oh, come on.
Yep.
Yeah, very cool. I also like the scene in X. Honestly, just the entire movie of X2. That's the scene that I like the most.
Okay.
That intro. You have the Nightcrawler scene, which is a banger, obviously, and then right after that, you have the people. You have Stryker, you have his task force, attacking the X Mansion, and you have Wolverine defending the X Mansion from a bunch of spec op guys. It's so sick.
And then you get Colossus showing up, and he's like, I can help. And no, Wolverine's like, no. And you're like, what do you mean, no?
Yeah.
Get him in there.
No, I got it. Yeah, that was a weird Colossus. We won't talk about that. Listen, not everything.
Oh,
is
you just didn't
gonna
like
be
the
a Hallmark
shininess?
movie.
It was fine. I was fine with it.
Does actual Colossus, can he shift back and forth? I thought he was just always metal.
No, I believe he's always metal. I think that's something
Yeah.
they changed. Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't like that part. That was weird.
Fair.
He like
Okay.
puts the shield on. Yeah.
Sure. All right. Fair enough. Nice. All right. A little fun comic.